What would you do if you were forced to smuggle tons of illegal drugs across the border with a fake family you barely even like? Yeah, sounds insane, right? Well, that's exactly what happens in today's story, and trust me, it only gets crazier from there. Welcome back to Movie Recaps Hub Podcast. Today, we're diving into a crime comedy classic from 2013, We're the Millers. Spoiler alert ahead, so if you haven't seen it yet, you've been warned. Let's get into it. So the movie kicks off with David just casually sitting at home watching YouTube videos. Nothing unusual, until he gets a text asking if he's got the goods. And of course he does. He packs up his bag and heads out, making deliveries to his regular clients. First stop a mom, then a broker, then a chef. His business is actually doing pretty well, and his client list isn't shrinking anytime soon. At one point, he runs into Ricky, someone he went to college with. They catch up, and David even gives him some kush. Ricky is honestly surprised that David is still dealing, but at the same time, he admits he kind of envies his lifestyle. No wife, no kids, no responsibilities. He could disappear tomorrow and no one would even notice. And yeah, when you say it like that, it doesn't sound great. Now, we also meet Rose, who works as a dancer at a club. She absolutely hates her job. She also happens to be David's neighbor, and the two of them do not get along at all. Then there's Kenny, this awkward, naive kid who comes up to David hinting that he wants to buy something. But David has a rule. He doesn't sell to kids, even though Kenny insists he's 18. Things take a turn when Kenny notices Casey, a homeless girl, getting harassed by some thugs. He tries to step in and help her, but instead gets beaten up. David has to intervene, and then Kenny makes a huge mistake. He blurts out that David is a dealer. Now the thugs turn their attention to David. They pull out a knife and demand his backpack. David tries to escape, manages to get away for a bit, but they chase him down. Eventually, he ends up cornered, jumps into a dumpster in a panic, but somehow manages to close it with his backpack inside while he's stuck outside on the lid. Yeah, not his best moment. The thugs end up ransacking his apartment and stealing everything. Soon after, David starts getting calls from his supplier, but he ignores them. Then suddenly, a black Jeep pulls up. Two guys jump out, tase him, and throw him inside. They take him to this huge estate owned by Brad. And here's the funny part. David is made to stand on plastic wrap, and he thinks it's because Brad might kill him and doesn't want to make a mess. But Brad casually laughs and says it's actually for a new skylight. Behind him is this massive aquarium, with a whale in it. Anyway, the real problem is that David owes Brad 43 grand. Brad offers him a way out, a win-win situation. He needs David to go to Mexico and bring back a small amount of kush. His usual courier got killed, so he needs someone reliable. If David succeeds, his debt is cleared, and he gets $100,000 on top of that. David is obviously hesitant because getting caught would mean life in a Mexican prison. But honestly, he doesn't have a choice. Now Kenny, being Kenny, suggests that David should dress up because he totally looks like a dealer. David immediately shuts that idea down. But then something interesting happens. A typical, wholesome family walks up to a police officer asking for directions, and the officer is super friendly and helpful. And that's when it clicks. David realizes he needs a family, so he starts recruiting. First, he approaches Rose and offers her $10,000 to pretend to be his wife. She refuses at first because she doesn't trust him. Then he recruits Kenny, which is super easy. Kenny even suggests bringing in Casey as the daughter. She agrees, but only for $1,000. Meanwhile, Rose's boss drops a disgusting new rule at work, basically telling her she now has to sleep with customers. That's the final straw. She quits on the spot, even though she desperately needs money. So she joins David's plan. Now the fake family is complete. Before leaving, David takes Kenny and Casey to get new clothes. But then he changes his mind about Kenny because honestly, he already looks like a nerd. So he takes his money back and gives it to Casey instead. At the barber shop, David asks for a haircut that makes him look like a miserable, overworked dad with a boring job, an annoying wife, and screaming kids. And awkwardly, the guy sitting behind him says, "Right here." Now at the airport, David passes security easily. Casey looks innocent both in her photo and in real life. Kenny not so much. He gets a full body check. Then on the plane, Rose suddenly shows up. She renegotiates her price to $30,000 instead of $10,000, and David agrees. They land, get their RV, and hit the road. At one point, Casey spots a fireworks stand and begs David to stop, but he refuses. Then Kenny and Rose start chanting too. David snaps and reminds them that they are not a real family. Eventually, they reach the Mexican border, and surprisingly, the guard just lets them through. David can't believe it actually worked. They arrive at a heavily guarded compound where everyone is armed. It's intense, but David keeps his cool. The others not so much. They meet a man called One Eye, who immediately threatens David with a gun. But once David mentions Pablo Chacon, Brad's supposed alias, things calm down. David says he's there with his family, and they're invited in. Then comes the big shock. It's not a small shipment, it's 2 tons of marijuana. Even David is stunned. He calls Brad, and Brad sounds surprised that the plan actually worked. While they're there, a woman offers Kenny some fruit. He politely refuses, until One Eye threatens to kill him if he doesn't take it. So yeah, he takes it. They pack the RV with all the drugs and leave. On the way out, they run into a corrupt officer who knows exactly what they're carrying. He asks for a bribe of $1,000. They don't have that kind of money, so he suggests something more personal. David realizes what he means and tries to get Rose to handle it, but she refuses. Then the officer says he prefers men. So David calls Kenny outside and tries to convince him to do it. Kenny refuses at first, but David guilt trips him into agreeing. Then the officer comes back and asks what's taking so long, and it turns out he meant 1,000 pesos, not dollars. David just hands him a 100 and they're good to go. Yeah, all that for nothing. At the US border, they run into the Fitzgerald family in another RV. They're loud and overly friendly, which is the last thing the Millers want. The Fitzgeralds basically force their way into interacting with them. Melissa, the daughter, starts liking Kenny. When it's time for inspection, they see someone else get caught with a joint. David panics and slams the brakes, causing some of their stash to fall out. Rose quickly wraps it in a blanket to make it look like a baby. The Fitzgeralds get super curious about the baby. At the checkpoint, David is clearly nervous. The dog starts barking, and they're pulled over for inspection. But right before things get bad, 5 illegal immigrants who were hiding under the RV suddenly run off. The officers get distracted and let the Millers go. They're shocked but relieved. They celebrate, blast music, and actually start bonding like a real family. Meanwhile, the real Pablo Chacon finds out his shipment is gone, and now he's coming after them. Back on the road, their RV breaks down while going uphill. No signal, no help. Casey and Rose go out to find assistance. Soon after, the Fitzgeralds show up again and offer them a ride. They know a mechanic. While riding with them, Eddie asks David how he met Rose, and David tells the actual story in surprising detail, which even impresses Rose. Then Don asks David to grab something from the glove box, and that's when David finds a badge and a gun. Don is a D agent. Now things are even worse. They plan to ditch the Fitzgeralds as soon as possible, but the garage is closed, so they have to stay overnight. Later, when Eddie tries to take the baby, Rose panics and accidentally throws the drug-filled blanket into the road, where it gets run over twice. Eddie is horrified. Casey quickly saves the situation by saying it was just a school project, not a real baby. That night, they sit around a bonfire, sing songs, and play drawing games. Melissa draws something, and the answer is plain and simple, but no one guesses it. Then Kenny tries to draw a skateboard, which is confusing. Later, Kenny and Melissa share a moment. She leans in for a kiss, but he just hugs her. David gives Kenny some advice afterward. Casey feels bad for Kenny and offers to teach him how to kiss. They practice, and honestly, she's not enjoying it much. Then Rose joins in and teaches him another technique while David just watches. And of course, Melissa walks in at the worst possible moment. The next day, Don drives them to the garage, but inside, the mechanic is tied up. Pablo found them. David hands Pablo the phone. Brad hears what's happening and immediately hangs up. One Eye is there too. Turns out, they track the drugs using a transmitter. The group starts arguing, exposing that they're not a real family. Pablo then asks Rose to perform. She distracts him with a dance, climbs the pole, and buys them time. David tries to knock out one eye but fails. Eventually, they manage to fight back, and Kenny even runs one eye over with the RV. They escape but chaos continues. A spider bites Kenny, and he runs outside in pain. Rose asks to see where he got bitten, and yeah, we'll leave that part to your imagination. They rush him to the hospital. There, David calls Brad, who offers him $500,000 if he delivers the drugs by tonight. The doctor says Kenny will be fine soon, but David wants to leave immediately. Rose and Casey refuse to go without Kenny. Then a guy named Scotty P shows up to pick up Casey. Rose questions him about his tattoos, especially one that says no regrets. Casey leaves with him but later comes back. Rose and David share a moment, and she reveals her real name is Sarah. Back at the hospital, they finally get Kenny and head out, but during the rush, David accidentally reveals the $500,000 deal. Everyone gets angry. They feel betrayed and walk away. David leaves alone, but quickly realizes he misses them. Meanwhile, Casey vents to Scotty, but he clearly has other intentions. Rose steps in and punches him. David returns, but the group demands an apology. He struggles at first, but eventually gives in and sincerely apologizes. They reconcile. On the way back, they run into the Fitzgeralds again. There's tension because of what Melissa saw. Kenny tries to fix things but ends up revealing the truth. Before things escalate, One Eye shows up again. A fight breaks out. Don jumps in and takes him down. Pablo takes Melissa hostage. David offers himself in exchange. Fireworks go off, creating a distraction. They fight back, disarm Pablo, and finally defeat him. Don arrests Pablo. In a weird twist, Don and Eddie share a moment too. Finally, David goes to deliver the drugs to Brad, but Brad refuses to pay because he missed the deadline. David realizes he was never going to get paid, so he tips off the D. Brad gets arrested. David and the others don't get the money, but they enter witness protection for a few months. And just like that, sometime later, David is living in the suburbs with Rose, Kenny, and Casey. What started as a fake family actually became real. He introduces them to the neighbors with a smile. We are the Millers. And that's your full recap of We're the Millers 2013. If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, drop a comment with your favorite scene, and subscribe to Movie Recaps Hub podcast for more detailed movie recaps just like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.